free world.
Yeah. My hitters be moving and shaking to stay out the streets. Yeah. Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so weak. Yeah. My hitters be moving and shaking to stay out the streets. Yeah. Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so. Snuff the shooter, snuff the looter, snuff the booster, snuff the money mover. Snuff the hater, snuff the player, snuff the
Hail to the Culture Washington Redskins podcast. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's your boy Bryce. As always, I'm joined by my man Rome. Rome, what up, bro?
What's good, man?
Nothing much, bro. Nothing much, man. Got something special for the audience, man, just in time for the holiday season and the new year. With the turn of this new year, obviously everyone knows it's a new decade. So with the last decade ending, in the name of it, we have compiled an all-decade team for your Washington Redskins. So I'm sure you're very interested to see who's made the list, as it was pretty fun compiling the list. Ron, what do you think about the process, man, it took to make the list, man?
Well, it revealed a lot about the Redskins over the last 10 years, and as we all know, it has not been a good 10 years. It has not been a good decade. But I think once you guys see this list and hear this list, you'll see some of the missteps of the Redskins, which you'll also see some of the things that they got right. And if some of these things could have timed up better, the decade might have been remembered a little bit differently.
Yeah, man. You make a good point with that, man. Another thing I'll point out in compiling the list was, like, the nostalgic factor, man. You know, bringing back old memories was a fun part of it, man. And some of the players that are on the list, I'll say, they may have not been premier players in the league, but the effort they gave to the Washington Redskins was definitely a valiant one. And, you know, that's why they made it. You know what I mean? It's not like we've had all pros at every position over the past 10 years. So let's jump into it, man. Let's start on the offensive side, which is, you know, seems to be one of the strong side of the list. Let's jump right into it, man. Quarterback. At quarterback, we've got RG3. It might be a shocker to some, considering that you're really basing it off one super strong year. But when you're making an all-decade team, you're kind of taking the prime of each player you're looking at anyway. So let's jump into RG3. Obviously, it came down to RG3 versus Kirk Cousins for us, and it was very, very close. Like, we didn't just choose RG. We actually had to talk about it for a second. And, Ron, what do you think about the selection of RG3 for the all-decade?
Well, man, it was almost a flip of the coin for me. 2012 RG3, as everyone knows, was very special. But let's not forget about 2015 Kirk. That was also a very good year. I believe he had 29 touchdowns to 11 or 12 interceptions. And Robert only had about 20 touchdowns in the air and about 7 on the ground. So Kirk did score more touchdowns in 2015. And they both had a playoff appearance, which is also fair to mention. But it was just something about how RG3 took the team over that year. If we were able to capture that every year, he was able to sustain that, then obviously this whole decade would have went a lot different. And that year, man, that was a special year. We were all thinking at that time that the decade would go a lot differently than it has. So, I mean, 2012 RG3 between the pass game and the run game, that was our little moment of Lamar Jackson, man. And it sucks now because as we made this list, one thing that hit me was our quarterback of the decade is the Baltimore Ravens' backup quarterback, and he might win a Super Bowl with them to end the decade. So that's crazy to think about in and of itself. But, yeah, man, what were your thoughts on picking RG over 2015 Kirk?
Well, man, I really feel like you summed it up perfectly, bro. Like, I couldn't say that better myself, man, at all. Like, that's exactly what it comes down to. I mean, with that moment that we captured for that year, if it could have been sustained, it would have been legendary. But, you know, we got a little piece of something that, you know, looked like Super Bowl caliber, you know, and all we can do is hope to regain that magic, you know, in the future. So yeah, let's keep it pushing though on that same note of 2012, man. With running back of the all-decade team, we went with Alfred Morris. This decision was a lot easier than the rest, I think, man. I mean, when you look at the numbers, I feel like running back's one of those positions where numbers really don't lie. yards on the ground, touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. They don't lie at all. And Alfred Morris had the most in the decade. What would you feel about the selection?
Yeah, man, I agree. It was definitely a little bit easier of a pick than most of the positions. The only person that I would say really was an honorable mention in this decade that made it tough was Adrian Peterson. 2018, he had over 1,000 yards for us. And it was a real tough year considering once Alex Smith went down and how everything happened, how he joined the team. But it kind of just pales in comparison. Like you say, numbers don't lie with running backs. 2012, Alfred Morris had about 1,600 yards. We could even go with 2013 Alfred Morris over AP's 2018 season with 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. But once again, 2012 was just that special, magical year. Alfred Morris and RG3 were pretty much neck and neck for Rookie of the Year that year, with Robert winning it. But Alf had 13 touchdowns that year, 1,600 yards. That's one of the better running back seasons probably of the entire decade, really. You could talk about Alfred Morris making an all-decade NFL team for that one standout season. So, yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer for running back.
Yeah, most definitely. So sticking on running backs, everyone knows how the league is nowadays. You have to have a third down RB. Third down RB, this is a no-brainer. Might be the only real third down RB we've had over the last decade, and that's Chris Thompson. And let's not sell him short because it was a no-brainer because he didn't have any competition to get this all-decade spot. Chris Thompson is a dog, man. One of the most explosive players on the team over the past decade as well. So if we were ranking most explosive, he would be on that list too. So shout out to Chris Thompson, man. Definitely one of the consummate pros we've had over the past decade.
Yeah, the only person I would throw out there, and this isn't a real competition, I'm giving it to Chris Thompson too, no question. Evan Royster. Evan Royster 2012 was a decent third down back. Definitely didn't give us what Chris Thompson gave us, but he is one that I remember throughout the decade that had a few sprinkle plays here and there.
Yeah, you're right. Evan Royster would catch a screen here and there, but, man, that dude could not take any carries. But, all right, let's keep it pushing, though, man. Shout out to Evan Royster, man, Penn State. All right, So fullback, man. This was, I guess, another no-brainer considering we really stopped using the fullback position. Darrell Young. Darrell Young was a pretty good fullback, too, man. Like, he was actually really good. I mean, he doesn't get much better at fullback than Darrell Young. He definitely could contribute on special teams as well. He was a big dude, man. He was hard to move. And, yeah, man, I missed having a fullback. I'm thinking about Darrell Young now.
Yeah, man, definitely no debate on that one. Darrell Young is the obvious choice for fullback, and he was a damn good one, man. He wasn't like an average fullback. He was, dare I say, an elite-level fullback. But the league has definitely gone away from that. Those were better times, in my opinion, but we can save that combo for another time.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, let's keep it pushing, man. Now we're going to the wide receivers. The way we did the wide receiver position, we did a wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 2, and then we did a slot receiver as well. So for wide receiver 1, we decided on Pierre Garçon for the all-decade team. So Pierre Garçon, man, not only does he have the yards and the stats, but he also passed the eye test. On the field, Pierre Garçon, man, he was a dog, man. He was a dog. Every third down we needed, we were going to Pierre. You know, he wasn't the fastest dude, but he would break touchdowns for us. Like, you know, like he would always set the tone. He wasn't a run out of bounds type. He was give you a little dip the shoulder as he's going out. Like, he's not going to just go out of bounds willingly. You know, Pierre played with that energy that was contagious to the rest of the team. And it's that nasty energy, you know, nasty in a good way. And I feel like if you got 11 guys with the mindset of Pierre Garçon on your team, you're in the playoffs every year. So shout out to Pierre Garçon, man, for the wide receiver number 1. And that goes without saying the stats that he put up. That's just as the type of player he is on the field. So, yeah, man, what do you think about that selection?
Yeah, man, you hit it out the park with your analysis of Pierre Garçon. So since you didn't throw any of the numbers at them, I'll go ahead and throw the numbers at them because you pretty much said it all already. 113 receptions, 1,300 yards, 5 touchdowns in 2013. And that was a year where the Redskins won about 3 games, and he was still balling out of his mind in a down season. Another season that we were looking at with Pierre was the 2015 season. We had yet again 72 catches and damn near 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. So not only was Pierre a dog, like you said, but he was consistent. This wasn't just like a once every few weeks thing. It was every game, every play, hit you in the mouth kind of mentality. And, yeah, man, that style is definitely missed, but I think it's coming back, and we'll touch on that here with our next receiver that we got on the list.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So wide receiver 2, we went with Terry McLaurin on the All-Decade team. Now, some people may hear this selection and think, wait, Terry McLaurin, he's only had 1 season, but break it down to him, Rome.
Only 1 season, but is a historic season. He is currently 7 yards away from breaking Gary Clark's Redskin rookie receiving yards. And if you look at it, if he's about 80-some yards away from breaking 1,000 yards. And if you compare that to a season of, let's say, Deshaun Jackson in 2014, it's very favorable. He's already had more catches than Deshaun had in his best years as the Redskins, and he's very close to hitting that 1,000-yard mark as Deshaun did. So if you go through the decade, man, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better season than Terry's having right now. And if you go through team history, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better rookie season that any Redskin has ever had. So it might sound crazy to some at first, but once you do your research and once you think about it a little bit, Terry McLaurin deserves to be on this list.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better myself, man. That was another one of the ones I should say that we really went back and forth about. We really debated this one, man. We didn't just go with Terry McLaurin. Like we had to convince ourselves that it was clear, so we went back and forth until we came up with a clear answer. And the more and more we thought about it, the more and more we debated, it was clear. Terry McLaurin is the best receiver that the Redskins have had this decade. And if you put him across with Pierre Garçon with 2012 RG3, that'd be something special. Just imagine that. So keeping it pushing, slot receiver. This is another tough one that we had to debate about. But the all-decade slot receiver is Santana Moss. And, Rome, I'll let you describe that one a little bit too, man, because, Santana had almost 2 careers with us. He had his first career where he was the Cowboy killer. Then he had the second half of his career where he was just a demon in the slot, man. So go ahead and break it down for the people.
Yeah, man. Now, I know some people may be thinking, how in the world did you guys make an all-decade Redskin list and you have Terry McLaurin and Santana Moss on the same decade list? Well, let me go ahead and explain that to you guys real quick. The reason Santana Moss is on this list as a slot receiver over a guy like Jamison Crowder is because you may not remember, but the 2010 season that Santana Moss had, he ended that year with 93 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Now, if you compare that to anything Jamison Crowder did, and you can find me anybody else who played the slot this decade better than Santana Moss did that season, then you can make your own damn list. But Santana Moss is making this list for that 2010 season alone. And then once you couple it on the fact with, how Bryce just said, this was his second season with us, basically. He had 10 years with the Redskins alone in his 14-year career. So this was the second half of his career in this decade, and he was a pretty damn good receiver despite his numbers dropping off. 2012, he had 8 touchdowns. That's probably the most, I believe, that any Redskin receiver has had this decade. So Santana Moss is on this list, and if you have a problem with that, I can't wait to hear your list.
Yeah, man, and I think and that's a great point, man, about that 2012 season. That 8 touchdown season, that was big, man, because he was our guy in the red zone, and that's when we had a young quarterback, young foundation, and Santana was that veteran leader, man, in the slot. And from 2010 onwards, man, he was definitely a threat from that slot position. Obviously,
Basically, what we're saying is we'll take a 30-year-old Santana Moss over a lot of these 20-year-old receivers that we've had the last 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, and that's a fact. And it was tough, though, because Jamison Crowder was a baller. Jamison Crowder could get open out of the slot as well. One reason we really gave it to Santana Moss is because Santana Moss had that gamer factor. You know, Santana Moss was a gamer. Santana Moss is the guy that got it when you needed it. You know, when you needed it, you could go to Santana. And I think that's the main difference between Santana versus Jameson when you're talking about all-decade team. Santana, we going to you when it's fourth and 4. And we got to get this conversion or the game's over. We're going to Santana Moss.
Yeah, man, I agree completely, man. Like I was saying in our little meeting, Jamison Crowder, his best years were when Deshaun and Pierre were eating. Like you just alluded to, Santana was the guy regardless of who else was on the team, even in his older age. But yeah, man, let's keep it pushing because the next position I think is going to cause a little bit of a stir too. Probably not.
Yeah, it might just, man. And in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. And this is the tight end position for the all-decade team. And the tight end is Jordan Reed. Now, like you said, this might cause a little stir, but when you're talking about an all-decade team, and this is how me and Rome calculate our all-decade team, you're talking about the prime of each player. You know, the stats also have to back it up. I'm not just saying a guy that had one game and it was a great one game. But one season in a compiled career of dominance, you know, can sway it even if the stats aren't there. Jordan Reed is the type of guy that when he has been available for the Washington Redskins, he has always been a factor. He's always been someone that defenses have to account for. He gets open is not even the word for Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed gets wide open on every route he runs just about. That's almost unbelievable for a guy that size. And, I mean, there's other players that could be considered for this tight end position on the all-decade team. But for me, it's a no-brainer for Jordan Reed. What you think, Rome?
Yeah, man, I agree for the exact reasons that you just broke it down. Like he said, we based it off if you had one good season that was head and shoulders better than someone else's best season in this decade, then that's what kind of got you ahead on this list. We haven't had too many great tight ends in this decade, but like I took you guys back to Santana Moss, I want to take you back to the start of the decade again. 2010, Chris Cooley, man, that was one of his better seasons of his career. I believe he had the most receiving yards that year that he had of any year. He also had 77 catches, but only 3 touchdowns. And the reason that Jordan Reed ekes him out in this competition for tight end of the decade is 2015. Jordan Reed was pretty much as unstoppable that year. I mean, what he was doing, I think he played about 12 games. If he would have been able to play a full season, I believe he would have definitely reached over 1,000 yards that year. And I mean, Jordan Reed was just incredible, man. He was like a wide receiver at the position damn near.
Yeah, no doubt. Jordan Reed was that, man, his prime was something special. You know, I wish the best for Jordan. I hope if, you know, football is still his plans, you know, I hope that he gets back to that level because it was definitely something special to watch. So shout out to Jordan Reed, man, the all-decade tight end for the Washington Redskins. So let's move to the offensive line. Oh, go ahead, bro.
Before we do go to the offensive line, one more tight end I did want to throw out there that had a year that had me considering him was Fred Davis in 2011. I don't know if any Redskin fans remember him from that season. He didn't score nearly as many touchdowns as Jordan Reed, but he had about 60 catches, almost 800 yards. Fred Davis was pretty good too, so I wanted to go ahead and give him that honorable mention from 2011.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good pull, man. Fred Davis, if he was really football all the way football, he would have probably, you know, kept ascending in the league. But it seemed like he had other things outside of football, you know, other ventures he wanted to go into. So hopefully he's doing well too, man. Shout out to Fred Davis though, he was a baller. So keeping it pushing, man. Moving to the offensive line, left tackle. This is a no-brainer, no matter how you slice it. That's Trent Williams. I don't think we got to say anything, man, because we've done talked so much Trent Williams over this past year. It's almost nauseating, man. And if we start talking Trent Williams, we're probably going to talk things about Trent Williams that we don't want to really discuss right now. So,
yeah.
Obviously, you guys know, man, left tackle Trent Williams. Not only is he the Redskins tackle of the decade, but in my opinion, he's a no question NFL tackle of the decade. And let's just hope he remains a Redskin. Any comment on that, Rome?
Nah, not too much to say on Trent Williams, man. I think this is the one spot on the All-Decade team that really no one can disagree on. So, yeah, man, Trent Williams, starting left tackle, All-Decade.
Yeah, no doubt. So, left guard. This was a tough one. And I think this speaks more to the mediocrity we've had at this position than it speaks to our ability to choose one. But when we thought about it, we ended up going with prime Sean Laval. And let's keep it real. I mean, Sean Laval wasn't great, but when he was healthy, him and Trent made a really formidable left side. Like Sean Laval could hold his own, and it seemed like Trent really enjoyed playing with him. And one thing I'll say about Sean Laval is he was nasty, man. He was nasty. And when you got that attitude on your offensive line, that goes a long way. So shout out to Sean Laval, man, at the left guard. What you think about that pick?
Yeah, Sean Laval, we ended up going with him because, he was just the most solid guy over the few years. But as you can obviously tell, that position has been a position of need throughout the decade mostly. The honorable mentions for that one were, I believe, Corey Lichtensteiner, which is kind of why we went with Sean Laval, and Eric Flowers, who's having a hell of a season. Better than a lot of us expected, but not enough to put him on our All-Decade list, although there was some debate.
Yeah, just not enough, man. But Eric Flowers, the way he's balling, he'll be on the next All-Decade team if we can lock him up. Let's hope.
I agree with that.
But so let's keep it pushing. That's definitely a topic for another time. All right, so the center position. This was another interesting one once you start really examining it. But for the center, for the Redskins All-Decade team, we've selected Chase Roulier. Now, people may be looking at that like, Chase Roulier, come on. I mean, he's young. He's barely done anything. But what other centers have we really had? And what other centers have you really think are better than Chase? I mean, Chase he can move. He has a solid anchor, and you just don't see him get blown off the ball too often. And that was just way too common with our centers in the past. What did you think about the selection of Chase Roulier?
Yeah, man, there's a reason that they stuck with Chase Roulier over Spencer Long, who was the only other person that we really considered competition for this spot. And I think Chase has proved why they were comfortable making that choice. It helps to have the guy that we're going to mention next at right guard, though.
It does. It definitely does. This might be another no-brainer. So for the right guard for the All-Decade team, we selected Brandon Sheriff. It's not too hard to see why. Brandon Sheriff, since he was selected 5th overall, has been a solid player. I mean, this might not be the best season he's had this year, but he's headed to surgery. I mean, this was an injured season for him, and he still gutted it out. Shout out to Brandon Sheriff. He's been a baller. His first 2 seasons were legit. I know, Rome, you can speak to that, man. Like, Brand, what do you think about this selection of Brandon Sheriff?
Yeah, man, Brandon Sheriff, his first 2 seasons made this an easy choice. Obviously, this has been a down season for him, but even with that said, he's still one of the better right guards, offensive linemen in the league in general. And I mean, they gotta re-sign him, man. I don't really see any scenario where you can just walk away from Brandon Sheriff at this point. But we'll save that topic for another pod, of course. Let's keep it pushing though, because the right tackle position is actually a position that I'm not even sure, did we even finalize this one? Did we come to an agreement on this one? Because this was definitely probably the most debated position.
Yeah, so right tackle is definitely a highly debated position. And mainly because you've got a couple guys that all have a claim to it for different reasons. So let's discuss it before we drop the selection. First, you have Morgan Moses. Now, Morgan Moses has had, in my opinion, one very solid season with the Redskins, and recently 2 not so good seasons with the Redskins. So it's really tough, with Morgan, because the one season that he did have, to me, that was a really good season, wasn't spectacular, but he was more than serviceable. He was top half of the league in right tackles, and it seems like he's dipped below that recently. Another guy that we threw into the mix, and he only played right tackle for a couple games for the Redskins, but when he did, it was very, very strong, and that was Ty Nsekhe. When you had Ty Nsekhe on the right side and Trent Williams on the left side, I think that was the best offensive line the Redskins had ever produced, and it was actually really, really good. I still remember it. So it was a really good line. So shout out to Ty Nsekhe. But I think, well, let's see. What do you think, Rome? Break down this position.
Yeah, man. It's a tough position because years past we've had guys like Tyler Columbus playing it. I'm leaning towards Morgan Moses because he's been able to hold down the spot, I believe, the longest of the decade. But I do hear what you're saying about Ty Nsekhe being, when he was playing, he did look better than Morgan at times. And the Redskins, they let Ty go. But I mean, it's a tough call, man. It's definitely a tough call.
Yeah,
it's not like Morgan has done enough to say like it's obviously him.
Right. But I think at the end of the day, I think we've come to a conclusion. The right tackle all decade watching the Redskins team is Morgan Moses. Sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles, man. Indeed, sometimes you're just almost in the right place at the right time, and that's definitely a part of the selection. Not to say Morgan Moses has been bad, but
Well, we just want to be fair, and this has been his competition. 2010, the starting right tackle was Jamal Brown. You guys remember him? Exactly. 2012 was Tyler Columbus. 2013, Tyler Columbus. 2013 or 14, Tom Compton. And it's been Morgan Moses since. So has Morgan Moses been a quote-unquote all-decade type of player? Probably not. But does he make this all-decade list because of the lack of talent at the position? Yes, he's been our best right tackle, even though he hasn't been one of the best right tackles.
I couldn't say that better myself. So let's keep it pushing, man. Now, time for the defense. Let's start on defense. Let's start on the line since we just ended with the line. Let's start with the edge rushers. Edge rusher number 1, I think this is clear as day, Ryan Kerrigan. Ryan Kerrigan is like Mr. Redskin. If there's going to be a Mr. Redskin for this era, it would be him. And he had a ridiculous streak of, never missing a game, which came to an end because of a concussion. But Ryan Kerrigan, man, he's been definitely one of the best Redskins over the past decade. When it's all said and done, he'll go down as one of the 50 greatest Redskins. Because, I mean, the dude was – when you're talking about maybe he's in consideration for best player of the decade, right behind Trent. So shout out to Ryan Kerrigan, man, and hopefully he's able to finish his career as a Redskin. What do you think about Kerrigan as a selection?
Oh yeah, I mean, just like Trent, this was another obvious one. I don't think there's any debate. Anybody making an all-decade Redskin team, Ryan Kerrigan and Trent Williams are the 2 most obvious players to have on the list.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. All right, man, so keeping it pushing, the second edge rusher, because you have to have 2 of those. This may surprise some people, but second edge rusher, we went with Brian Orakpo. Now, there's a little competition there for him. You've got Preston Smith. He's a pretty good edge rusher. And he's even gone elsewhere and proven to be an even better edge rusher than he was here. But that's a problem. You have to judge someone on what they were here. And when Preston Smith was here, I don't think he was, in my opinion, he was never better than what Brian Orakpo was for the Redskins at the beginning of the decade. So what do you think about that selection?
Yeah, man. It was a pretty tough selection. We went with Orakpo over Preston Smith. He was never really an adequate replacement for Orakpo. Another guy that we didn't talk too much about, but also had a good year in 2016 with the Skins was Trent Murphy. He had about 9 sacks. But none of these guys really made any Pro Bowls with the Redskins, and that is what eked out Arakpo. I believe it was 2010 and 2013 he had a Pro Bowl selection. 2013, though, to me was the year that really made the difference. He had about 10 sacks. I think he had a pick 6 that year and 2 fumble recoveries. So, it's more than just getting to the quarterback when you're an edge rusher. That's obviously your main job, your main focus. But if you can get that ball out, or if you can have a nose for the ball and get to the ball, as any defensive position, that's what you want to do, is get that ball back for your team. In 2013, that was what Arakpo was doing. So that, to me, is what eked him out over Trent Murphy, who had a really solid year 2016, and over Preston Smith, who had a couple of really consistent years, albeit not spectacular, but they were all really good years back to back to back. So,
yeah, facts. Yeah, shout out to Brian Arakpo, man. I think his time here gets underrated sometimes, but I mean, he made multiple Pro Bowls, and he had 10 sack seasons, and you can't take that away from him. It would have been nice. It would have been, I wouldn't say nice, but it would have been interesting to see what him and Kerrigan could have became if they were able to, stay teamed up for their entire careers. But
we should have never let him go. I'll say this too: the gap between Arakpo and Kerrigan on this list is probably closer than the gap between Arakpo and Smith and/or Murphy. Arakpo was pretty damn solid this decade for the Redskins.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. So let's keep it pushing, man, to the D line, the guys that make it happen for those edge rushers. So D lineman number 1. This may surprise some people that he's made it number 1, but we went with Matt Ioannidis, and a part of this was that it's not a ton of competition for these positions, but another thing is Matt Ioannidis is a straight baller, man. And, to get the amount of sacks that he gets from that interior position just goes to show you what type of athleticism he holds right there, man. He's a beast. And Matt Ioannidis definitely D lineman number 1 on the All-Decade team.
Yeah, man. To me, this was, like you just said, a combination of Matt Ioannidis being a baller and a combination of just a lack of competition. You look at other guys that play his position, and you have, your Stacey McGee's, your Jason Hatchers, your Jarvis Jenkins of the world. None of these guys are what I would say are straight trash, but Matt Ioannidis has obviously been better than them the last 2 seasons than these guys were at any point. Really, the closest to him might have been Adam Carricker, but his career with Washington ended kind of on the injury plague kind of note. But Matt Ioannidis, man, the last 2 seasons has set himself really above and beyond.
Yeah, so shout out to Matt Ioannidis, and right now, as of now, still 1 game to go, but he has 8.5 sacks. And, if he is able to get 1.5 sacks and he ends with 10 sacks on the season, you could definitely consider him a Pro Bowl snub. And he could be one of those guys that doesn't make the Pro Bowl but ends up getting a sneaky second-team All-Pro nod just because he's been balling as hard as he has. And coaches take notice of that, even if, some of the media and stuff don't. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, shout out to Matt Ioannidis, man. He's definitely a fan favorite. And shout out to the Redskins for making the right move by locking him up. But keeping it pushing to the second D lineman, I think this one is one that is going to surprise people the most, man. And for the second D lineman, we went with none other than Chris Swaggy Baker. And this one's interesting, man, because a lot of people may wonder how did we get there. But Chris Baker's 2015 season was really, really strong, and he extended that into 2016. And he was a beast, man. He was a beast from the interior. You're talking about a guy that provided 6 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. He lived in the backfield in 2015. And in 2014, he was a baller as well, man. It's almost like one of those guys that the Redskins really kind of groomed. And maybe if he would have stayed with us, he would have been even better. But what do you think about that selection?
Yeah, man. To me, this was almost an easy selection too. There were a couple other guys that played pretty well at that position and nose tackle. And the reason that Chris Baker makes this list to me is because his ability to play every position on the D line that the Redskins had while running the 3-4. because you could plug him in at nose, you could plug him in at the position Ioannidis plays or the other end. And, I mean, he seemed to ball from any spot, like you just said. And his versatility is what I would say was his strongest attribute, and that's why he is on the All-Decade Redskins team.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Chris Baker for making the All-Decade team, man. I always love Chris Baker's celebrations, man, his energy when you get a sack, when you make a big play, man. Got to have a Chris Baker or two on the squad. So shout out to him, man. Let's keep it pushing. Third D lineman, Jonathan Allen was our selection, All-Decade team for the third D lineman position. And I think that I like Jonathan Allen here more than most. And I think I also took some convincing on this. But the more I think about it, man, Jonathan Allen is a volume tackler at defensive tackle. He gets to the ball carrier, and you can't have enough of those type of guys on your defensive line rotation. He's not going to wow you with the sacks, but he's a solid player, and I think he deserves a nod.
Yeah, definitely, man. Jonathan Allen, again, this is another situation where it's like the competition throughout the years hasn't been that stacked at the position, which is why you draft a guy like Jonathan Allen. But what he's given us the last 2 years has definitely earned him this spot. His sack number is down this year from last year, but 8 sacks at his position last season isn't something to just poo-poo. And, yeah, man, 5 sacks this season isn't something to just poo-poo. You'd like to see a little bit more from Jonathan Allen being a first-round pick, but he's done enough to make the All-Decade team. And I would say not just for his play on the field, but for his demeanor off the field and his unique leadership ability.
Yeah, I agree, man. Shout out to Jonathan Allen. That's another thing you can't underestimate is his leadership ability. So let's keep it pushing, man. Moving on to the linebackers. Middle linebacker number 1. I think this is another no-brainer, and that is London Fletcher for the All-Decade team. Some may say London Fletcher, he's old, but no, he was still here till 2013, and he was actually still balling quite hard until 2013. Leading the team in tackles in those years. So, shout out to London Fletcher, man. What do you think about that selection?
Yeah, man. I think it goes Trent Kerrigan and then London Fletcher. Like, those are, like, if you're talking Redskins 2010 to 2020, like this decade, 2019, then, yeah, man, I don't see how you can make a list without those 3 guys on it in some way. So, yeah, I don't even have to get into London, man. It should be obvious.
Yeah, sure. I mean, London Fletcher had 166 tackles in 2011. That is ridiculous. 96 of them were solo. I mean, London Fletcher was just balling out of control, man. So shout out to
Pro
London.
Bowl selection 2010, 2011, and 2012. That's his first 3 years with the team. So, I mean, once again, this is another obvious no-brainer.
Yeah, for sure. So London Fletcher for that. Now, the second linebacker position was a lot harder to come to, man. But we ended up coming to a guy that I think we felt like passed not only the stat test, but also passed the eye test for his most dominant year with the Redskins. And that was Will Compton. Now, he was never a star with us, but his best year, he was a baller. You're talking about just around 100 tackles. A couple sacks. I mean, you had to like what Will Compton brought, and he also brought that attitude and team camaraderie type of guy that everyone got along with. What do you think about that selection? Because that was a tough one for us both.
Yeah, man. Now, in the same token of London being an obvious selection, the guy next to London in this spot is far less than an obvious selection. And I know a lot of people will jump and say, oh, what about like Perry Riley or someone like that, you know, Compton only started like 1 year really as an inside linebacker, but it was what he did his entirety as a Redskin. I like his fight. He didn't have the opportunity, let's say that Perry Riley or some of these other guys or Zach Brown or Mason Foster had when they came in. Compton had to work his way from special teams into the starting role, and in my opinion, they should have kept him around. They should have allowed him to hold that spot down, but. You know, I'm not a coach, and here we are. But I am part of Hail to the Culture, and this is our list, and we have Will Compton as our inside linebacker next to London Fletcher. So once again, like I said earlier, if someone has an issue with that, I'd love to hear your list. But I like the pick of Will Compton.
Yeah, I like it too, man. I mean, people are going to mull about that. People are not going to like that one, but you go down through the list of our middle linebackers in the past after London Fletcher, and, I mean, maybe you can say Perry Riley, but we went with Will Compton over him. So let's keep it pushing from there, man. Now we move to the secondary. We'll start with cornerback number 1. We were both in agreement with this, and we didn't have too much of a debate, and that is D'Angelo Hall, man. D'Angelo Hall was a beast with the Redskins, and many people will underestimate that. Rome, what do you think about that selection, man?
Yeah, man. 2010, D'Angelo Hall had, 6 interceptions, I believe. I believe that was the year we got 4 of them off of Jay Cutler. He scored 2 pick sixes. He had a fumble recovery return for interception that season. And then, we could just not even pick from 2010 either. We could go up to 2012. I believe he had another interception for a touchdown. D'Angelo Hall, man, he was a touchdown machine. And that's from a defensive player and a defensive standpoint. He had 3 touchdowns that year, actually. One fumble recovery for a touchdown as well. And when you're doing that as a defender, when you're scoring touchdowns, when you're not just taking the ball away, but when you get the ball in your hand and you're a threat to score, then, yeah, you're making the All-Decade team. Yeah, that's obvious. A lot of guys, Trent, Kerrigan, and London, I didn't hype up too much, but I'm going to hype up my man D. Hall, man, because I feel like he deserves more hype than he gets, and I feel like he should have consideration for the Hall of Fame. Now, I'm not saying that he should make it. I'm not saying by no means he's a first ballot guy or anything like that. But D'Angelo Hall had a damn good career, man. He had a real solid career if you count the first 5 years before he was a Redskin. But we'll just keep it to the 10 that he was, and we'll try to keep it to this decade. But he even transitioned to safety, and that was something that we'll get into here in a minute. D'Angelo Hall almost made the Redskins All-Decade team twice on this one list from us. That's how good he was with the Redskins this decade. And people need to recognize that.
Yeah, I agree, man. I definitely don't think he gets his just due, but he got it on this list. So let's keep it pushing, man. Cornerback number 2. This is another one that was definitely pretty tough for us to come to a decision on. But your cornerback number 2 on the Redskins All-Decade team is Bashaud Breeland. And I like this pick a lot, man. It really came down to Breeland versus 2015 Norman. And at the end of the day, man, Breeland's consistency won it for him. What do you think about that selection?
Yeah, man, it was real tough because 2015 Norman was really the only year that the Redskins had him where you had that aura about him, where teams weren't really going to try to throw to him too much. And what that meant, the reason Breeland, in my opinion, made it over him is because of that aura that they had on Josh Nomer in the first couple of years. They were trying Bashaud Breeland, and he each year had double-digit pass breakups and got 2 or 3 picks each season. I believe he led the team in interceptions the first year that Norman was on the team. So, yeah, man, Bashaud Breeland held his own in a situation where he was the one getting tested. So that is why he is on this list over a guy like Josh Norman.
Yeah, facts, man. Shout out to Breeland, because not a lot of people aren't going to understand that pick, but if you really go back and watch those films, man, Breeland was a really, really good corner for the Redskins, and I don't think the nation realized it at the time, but he's starting to get his just due now with the Chiefs. So best of luck to Breeland.
For the people that want to know why Dunbar didn't make this list, it's the lack of a complete season. Dunny had a close call. He was a close call, but he just didn't string together enough games, in our opinion, to make the All-Decade list.
Yeah, especially as compared to Breeland. So keeping it pushing, man. Another guy that the Kansas City Chiefs stole from us is our selection for slot cornerback, and which is Kendall Fuller. Great slot cornerback while he was with us, man. Definitely used to lock it up. Now he's still playing some slot, but mostly playing outside for the Chiefs, man. He's balling. Shout out to Kendall Fuller, man. I mean, can't say enough about the dude. Was a guy the Redskins took, and they ended up trading for Alex Smith. In hindsight, it hasn't worked out for us. It's worked out way better for them, but, we'll see. So shout out to Kendall Fuller, man. He was definitely a good player, man, for the Redskins while he was here.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
And so let's move to the safeties, man. I think this is like one of the funniest ones yet. So let's get it, man. At strong safety, we've got DJ Swearinger. So a lot of people some people might not like that one, but DJ Swearinger had a couple real standout years with the Skins, man. And I know you're a big DJ Swearinger guy, Rome. So I'm gonna let you kind of go into that a little further.
Yeah, man. I know a lot of people might cringe at DJ being on the All-Decade team, but safety has been a pretty inept position for the Redskins over the last decade. And if you look at it, DJ Swearinger has probably given us our most consistent years. He's going up against a guy like Brandon Merriweather, who DJ Swearinger played better than in his time here. And then there's other guys on the list like Madu Williams or Ryan Clark. It's another situation where the competition isn't that great. So although DJ Swearinger might not have been one of the greatest safeties of all time of the last decade, he has definitely been one of the best Redskins safeties of the last decade. And that's saying a lot because he's played on a lot of teams this decade. But this is another situation, man, where even the next safety we were going to talk about, Bryce, this is why I was giving D'Angelo Hall so much credit. It was tough to not pick a season where D'Angelo Hall was playing safety and pencil him in as on the All-Decade team as a corner and a safety because he had better seasons than some of these guys, man.
Yeah, that's true, man. And with this next safety, we thought about this a lot. And honestly, man, the more and more we've gone back and forth, and even to this moment, I still don't think we've locked in all the way. So we're going to really break you guys down through the thought process. So we got a couple options now. Right now, man, Landon Collins is looking like he's your all-decade safety. But we've got a dark horse in the race that you all must know about. And that is, he was a dark horse while he was here, to be honest, because you always wanted him cut, but somehow he always remained on the team. And it's none other than Reed Doughty. Yes, I said it, people. Reed Doughty is getting real consideration for the Redskins All-Decade team. How, you may ask? Well, let's first start off with the fact that we've had no safety better than Reed Doughty since Reed Doughty. I shouldn't say better than Reed Doughty, but we've had no safety that's had as many tackles as Reed Doughty that's played for the Redskins as long as Reed Doughty did. So he gets credit for his tenure with the Redskins, first of all. Second of all, Reed Doughty had some pretty good seasons. You're talking about a couple seasons where he had 3 seasons back-to-back with over 90 tackles. People sleep on that. Well, I'm sorry, 2 seasons back-to-back with over 90 tackles, one with 88. So he went, in 2010 and 2011, he went 93 tackles and then 88 tackles. So Reed Doughty was a lot better than people give him credit for. For the sake of having the right list, we have to go with Landon Collins after a lot of thought. But, yeah. We got to go with Landon Collins. But Reed Doughty was a dark horse candidate, man. But with Landon Collins right now, you're talking about a guy that has 117 tackles. I know he's not been what we want in coverage maybe, but at the end of the day, you definitely see a guy that can be a big part of our defense going forward. So for that, Landon Collins does get the nod. But I'm just letting y'all know, man, Reed had a real shot up until this moment, man. I think we would have been doing an injustice to put him over Landon Collins, even though Landon Collins has only been on the Skins for 1 year.
Yeah, we obviously have to go with Landon. But once again, man, this is a situation where we have just the competition, man. The position has been so terrible the last decade. We're looking at guys like Deshaun Goldston. We're looking at Dante Whitner past his prime. There's not much competition to speak of, and the fact that Landon Collins can be having a down season and make our All-Decade team tells you how bad the position has been at safety. Yeah, man, it's been a rough decade where you have to consider guys like Reed Doughty or Brandon Merriweather for your All-Decade team.
Yeah, man. I think you just kind of summed up the entire decade as a team, man. It's been a rough decade. It's been a rocky decade, but we've had some highlights. And I think the team that we ended up choosing reflects the fact that there were some highlights and there've been some lows. But at the end of the day, I mean, like, the team, you know, it is what it is, man. We haven't had the best team, but we've had some players sprinkled in there that I think you made another good point, Rome, that if we could have caught all that lightning in the bottle at the same time, we could have been something special. And I think in the NFL, you're always just a few moves away from really, you know, being one of those teams that's contending for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, definitely, man, definitely. So, I mean, there you guys have it, man. Or if you guys have any issue with this list or disagree with this list, we'd love to hear from you. You know, tweet us. You know, come out with your own all-decade list so we can compare them. But I think our list is pretty solid, man. I think this all-decade team is pretty legit. I really like the offense, man. I would take this all-decade Redskins offense against just about any defense, man. But the defense, in my opinion, is a little shaky, but I do like the guys that we selected.
Yeah, defense definitely shaky. Offense, man, we could take them anywhere. And definitely appreciate everybody for listening. Like Rome said, if anyone has any thoughts on the list, feel free to tweet us at HTTR Culture. Once again, it's hail to the culture and hail to the Redskins.
Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so weak. My hitters be moving and shaking to stay out the street. Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so